Hey everyone, good morning from sunny Seattle. My name is Robert Snyder, but my friends call me Bob, and welcome to the American Center in Moscow's video on 50 states. And I'm really excited today to talk about a place that's very near and dear to my heart. It's the state of New Jersey. I grew up there and I lived there for the majority of my life, and I have a lot of fond memories, I love the state. So, before we really get into it, I just want to say thank you very much for joining today. Welcome. If anybody is new, once again, my name is Bob. I host typically Last Week in America every week on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Moscow time. So tune and check it out. Also, if this is your first time to the American Center Moscow page, definitely go and like, comment, and subscribe. They have a ton of really cool content that comes out almost daily. So yeah, definitely go and check that out. And yeah, there's a ton of stuff. So anyway, welcome, and I guess let's get into it. So if we go to the first slide, we have I'd like to just talk a little bit about myself and my experience in New Jersey. So growing up, I mean, people have seen my other streams. They might know that I do an about me and talk a lot about school. First off, if you guys have any comments or questions, go throw it in the chat box. I'm watching the whole time, so love to hear it. And then Timofey's asked, is this the first stream about U.S. states? It is not. So there's a bunch. If you go on the AMC page and like and subscribe, you don't have to subscribe, but you can go and see. This is part of a series of the 50 states, and I believe it's me and other interns from AMC will go and present on states that we're from or currently live in and such. So anyway, so yeah, chat box, let me know. I'm super excited to be here and talk to you guys. So about myself. On this slide, I have two pictures. I have on the right, it says, welcome to the borough of Mendham. I in Jersey, in a small town called Mendham in northern New Jersey. So that is about, I guess, probably 45 minutes on a good day outside of New York City. So really, I guess kind of southwest is really where it is of New York City. So it's pretty close. It was a big commuter town to a lot of people worked in New York, and that's typical of what you'll find in northern New Jersey. A lot of the times is people will commute to New York City to go and work. So it's a lot of business people and such. So I grew up there. I went to high school there. I loved it. A little fun fact about Mendham. Actually, the old governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, was from Mendham. So I've driven past his house a few times back in the day when I was a lot younger. So I went to high school in Mendham, and then I went up to college in upstate New York, got my undergrad, and I moved down to, on the picture on the left, you can see I actually lived in this town on the right-hand side of the inlet. That's where all the boats are passing through. So that's a little place called Manasquan, New Jersey, and I lived around there. I had some family down there and lived down there and worked there, and that's kind of in the middle of New Jersey, right on the ocean. And it's actually really interesting. It's the start of the intercoastal. So all those boats going in there, they could actually get down to Miami without having to go back in the ocean. So that's kind of cool if you're interested in U.S. waterways, I guess. But yeah, anyway, if anybody has any questions on any words I'm using, because I tend to speak fast and I have a lot to cover today, please just ask, and I'll be happy to clarify or slow down or something. So anyway, so after my undergrad, I lived in the place on the left, Manasquan, New Jersey, and then I moved out to Seattle, and I go to graduate school at the University of Washington. And since this, I guess, a little bit over a month now, I've been interning with the American Center in Moscow, just hosting presentations and some discussion clubs, and it's been a great time. So yeah, before I really do a deep dive into New Jersey, I'd like to go to the next slide, and let's have a look. I'd like to kind of see if there's a discussion for any first impressions. So do you guys know anything about New Jersey? I know it can kind of be overshadowed by New York. And if you do, what are the first things you hear you think of when you hear people talk about New Jersey. So whether you guys have ever been in New Jersey, or I guess a lot of times when you fly to New York City, you would just go and fly into New Jersey and then take the train to New York. So a lot of people view it as more of just a stop along the way than their actual initial destination. So yeah, I'd just like to see if anybody has any first impressions. If not, I know it's a little state, so we can keep going. I mean, typically people, yeah, kind of view it as kind of there. So it's not it's for, I guess, foreigners when they're coming, it's mostly go to New York City or go to Philadelphia or the big cities on the East Coast. And New Jersey kind of sits right in between there, and where their largest city isn't nearly as big, but they are super close and affiliated with Philadelphia and even more so New York City. So we have Dina Pelt says, I heard that women tend to like fashion there. Yeah, I would say that, I guess. There's a lot of, I'll get into it a little bit more. There's a lot of malls in New Jersey that people, a lot of very high-end, really expensive, like designer, like American brands like Gucci and fancy watch stores and stuff. There's malls in New Jersey that sell that. And I'll get into why that is, because a lot of people will come down from New York and such. So anyway, if we go to the next slide, let's get into it. And so first things first, I wanted to go and just show a map for those people. Yeah, you see, yeah, Timofey says, I think in Russia, common people don't know much about New Jersey specifically. We only know a few things about New York, LA, and Washington. Yeah, exactly. That's what I kind of imagined, that it's just, I could definitely see how people wouldn't know about it. But yeah, so let's get into it. And I'm really excited to teach everybody about it because I love this place. So on the right, you have a map of the U.S. and specifically New Jersey, so you can see where it is in relation. On the north is bordered by New York, which is the big triangle state, and then is Pennsylvania, a larger square. So those, and then to the south, you have a slight border with Delaware, actually. But that's mostly cut off by the Delaware Bay. As we can see on the left-hand side, we see a more in-depth, detailed map of New Jersey. And on the left, the borders of New Jersey are cut off by the Delaware River on the left-hand side. So it's everything east of the Delaware and then south of New York. So on the right, it would actually look like Jersey City is actually right across the Hudson River to New York City. So it actually looked like New York City is actually farther south than the top of New Jersey. So yeah, first get a map going, and then I'd like to get into some quick fun facts if we go to the next slide. So New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the United States. So there are more people per square mile, I think over 1,000, I think 1,100 and change of people per square mile in New Jersey than anywhere else in the United States. And a lot of that has to do with just its location. It's there's just people everywhere. And so it's the fourth smallest state by area, but 11th most populous. So it's just really built up. And I tell people out here, my colleagues and my friends out here, they'll ask, it was like, oh, what is it like living in New Jersey? I'm like imagine like driving on a road and like in the middle of the night and you're never the only person driving on the road, I guess is the best way I've kind of described it. Is like I've very rarely been alone out there, and there's just people everywhere. So it's kind of it's cool actually. There's a lot going on, but I enjoy it. So for the history of New Jersey, so it was one of the original 13 colonies and a battleground during the Revolutionary War. Played a very important role in that, and it's a really deep history with the Revolution and the birth of the United States and such. And Trenton was actually the capital of the U.S. at one point. So yeah, it was played a really big role. And these are kind of some more fun facts. So the street names in Monopoly, which is a really popular board game, I would assume that people might have played it or heard of it. The streets are named after streets in Atlantic City. So which is the Las Vegas of the East, I guess. It's really outside of Las Vegas. It's really it was the only other place that you can gamble legally. in the U.S. and on the East Coast. So it kind of got built up to that. I don't think it's nearly as spectacular, and I have a bunch of pictures in here about of it, but it was pretty. Yeah, so it's Las Vegas of the East, I guess. But and then so Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb, or kind of, it's a little questionable on what he actually invented nowadays and what he borrowed from people. He had his laboratory in New Jersey, in Menlo Park, and he did a ton of inventions. He invented a ton of things. You can't do it. He invented a lot of things. So and then this is my favorite part. It's the diner capital of the world. And if we go to the next slide, I'd be happy to explain that. So this is a picture of the Arlington Diner in New Jersey. And so a diner is like, for me, it's a restaurant that is typically open 24 hours of the day, or almost, or like it'll close at 1 a.m., 1 in the morning, and then open back up at like 5 in the morning. So typically, but a lot of them are 24 hours, and you'll see this one's open 24 hours. And the cool thing about a diner is it's like it has every type of Americana kind of food imaginable. So you can go in at 5 a.m. and be like, you know what I really want? I want a steak dinner right now. And they'll have a steak dinner for you. Or you go at like 6 p.m. You're like, I'm really feeling bacon and eggs for dinner. And you could do that. So it's a very big New Jersey thing that every town, almost every town has a diner, and they're really popular. It's like a common meeting place. I remember in high school, me and my friends would go, we meet at the diner and stuff. So yeah, it's a magical place for me, and it's really kind of has an eclectic feel, and it's just kind of deep old Americana, and it's a lot of fun. So definitely my favorite. And then if we go to the next slide, we'll see this thing. This is kind of a food. There's two things to call it. It is pork roll. On the left, you see the packaging for it, and on the right, it's the meat that's under the eggs. And it's like this like processed pork meat. It's like, I guess to the outsider, it would be viewed as pretty gross, to be honest. It's like it's not healthy at all. It's just fatty and delicious, like sliced pork, and in the like emulsified pork meat. Yeah, I guess that would be it. But in North Jersey, people call it Taylor ham, and in South Jersey, people call it pork roll. And I've seen people getting in fights and spats about, not physical fights, but like verbal arguments about who's right and who's wrong with what it's actually called. And it's kind of like it's a very big New Jersey thing where I have a difficult time finding this anywhere else in the country and probably the world. And it's very popular in New Jersey, and that's kind of what everybody. It is not expensive, Timothy. It is not expensive at all. It's like a breakfast meat. Instead of bacon, we have pork roll, or Taylor ham, as I grew up calling it Taylor ham because I grew up in North Jersey, and then I moved to South Jersey, and I started calling it pork roll because I wanted to fit in. But it's still Taylor ham in my heart. But yeah, no, not expensive. It's pretty delicious. It's not healthy for you, but yeah. Anyway, well, and it's bright. Whatever. It's 8 a.m. here, so the sandwich is making me a little hungry. But anyway, so if we move to the next slide, we can get into a little bit of the history of New Jersey. So this is like pre-United States history. So prior to European colonization of the Americas, New Jersey was inhabited by the Lenape people. So this is kind of they're grouped together by linguistic similarities. So they were formerly known as the Delaware languages, whereas Delaware's a state in New Jersey now, named after the tribes, but or the nations really. So, but the modern term is the Lenape linguistic groups. So yeah, you can see that they inhabited New Jersey prior to European colonization here, and we could see that we have Philadelphia and New Amsterdam, which we'll get into. And yeah, so after that, so when the Dutch, at the start of colonization, the Dutch actually arrived in New Jersey first. So they arrived and they colonized the area, creating the colony of New Netherlands with its capital in New Amsterdam. So New Amsterdam is the former name of New York. That's what New York was called before the British took it as a colonial acquisition. So they created New Netherlands in the north, and I have a map on the next slide. I'll show you guys. And then the Swedish actually colonized by Philadelphia, and the south creating New Fiji, or probably mispronounced that terribly, but New Sweden would be the English translation. So after I guess 60 years later, so a pretty long time, but we view history as happening really quickly, I guess. But so after that, the British took control of that entire area, and they created the province of New Jersey, where in the modern territory of New Jersey, actually splitting into East and West New Jersey. But that after there was a compromise and they merged into one New Jersey, province of New Jersey. So, but it was named after the Isle of Jersey, which is an island in the English Channel that during the English Civil War, the king actually fled and he was taken haven on the island of Jersey. So in response to this, he kind of named the a colony after the island that really housed him during the Civil War. So that's kind of a little bit of prehistory. And if we go to the next slide, we got some maps. So on the right is a very old map of New Holland, and I guess it's really not geographically accurate, but I wanted to show that the historical extent of that. So you can actually see New Jersey kind of carved out there. It's a little difficult because things aren't actually like the states aren't bordered like they would. You see that, and then Plymouth Rock, where the British landed, and the Puritans, they landed there. And then we actually have the little island in the middle is Long Island. So the intersection of the island and the big river would be New Amsterdam, or to be future New York. So on the left is a lot more clear of a map of this. And we have New Jersey, and we have the colony of New Netherlands, starting with New Amsterdam, going up the Hudson River, and that colonized parts of New Jersey. And then we have the New Sweden on the bottom left with Fort Christina, but that river that looks like it's Schuylkill, that's actually pronounced Schuylkill, and that's where Philadelphia is located, is right on the mouth of the Schuylkill. So let's go to the next slide and let's talk more about the history. So 817. So New Jersey was one of the 13 colonies that revolted against the British Crown. I believe it was the 7th to ratify the Constitution, and it became known as the Crossroads of the Revolution. There's a bunch of really big battles there, with the Battle of Trenton, which I'm going to go and get into in a minute or two here. So big player in the Revolutionary War. In the Civil War, it was a really big player as well, and it sent a lot of soldiers, a lot of regiments from New Jersey to fight in the Civil War, and it fought it was part of the North in the Civil War, the Union. It fought for because slavery was abolished in 1806 in New Jersey. So after that, kind of New Jersey played a very large role in the Industrial Revolution. They had a lot of iron deposits, and they played a very large role in manufacturing, actually, due to the fact that they sit on the fault line. So the falls line, there were essentially a lot of waterfalls going down the East Coast, the northeast of New Jersey, not just the northeast of the U.S., from New York and Massachusetts, going all the way down, and that's where cotton mills and such were built, because they used the water power. So that's why you saw the Northeast was really big in production, is they had this ability to use water power. So it played a big role in the Industrial Revolution, and during the World Wars, it played a really large role in naval production. Another kind of not really a fun fact, but the Hindenburg disaster, which was the explosion of the hydrogen balloon, the German hydrogen Zeppelin that took place in New Jersey in Lakehurst, in northern New Jersey, and then in the Cold War, New Jersey. Actually, want to try this a little bit to Russia. They played a large role in that as well, and were a large part of the U.S. military-industrial complex. So, if we go to the next slide, we can see this is a picture of a very, very famous painting that is hung in the Met, which is the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. And this is George Washington crossing the Delaware. So he, on Christmas Eve, in the middle of the night, he decided to surprise attack the Hessian, which were German mercenary troops of the British, and cross the Delaware and won at the Battle of Trenton, which is like a very important pivotal battle in the beginning of the war, because he, like before this, the Continental Army, and during the Revolutionary, was just constantly losing battles. So this was kind of a big turning point. It inspired hope, and wow, we can actually win a battle against the British, and we have a chance. So yeah. Also for World War II, there was if anybody has seen the show The Pacific on HBO, one of the guys, John Basilone, he was a Medal of Honor recipient at the Battle of Guadalcanal, and he is from Raritan, New Jersey, actually. So a little fun fact there. But yeah, I'd like to get into our second discussion for all you watchers on the history, and it's kind of a pretty specific one, and people probably won't know the answer to it, but why? I know a lot of Americans probably don't know the answer to this. So the question is, why do you think New Jersey played an important historical role in the World Wars and the Cold War? So I see we have 24 watching right now. I just wanted to say my name is Bob, if for anybody who's joined us. Yeah. So while you guys go, maybe think about this a little bit and try to prepare some responses. I'll go and talk a little bit about their involvement. So a lot of the New Jersey is very strategically located on the East Coast, as it sits between the two major, really the two larger cities, with New York City kind of very, very important. And in the World Wars, New Jersey's industry is big. So they actually they were a very active naval yard. And it's one of the largest ports. It is the largest port on the East Coast, is the corner of New Jersey and New York. So they were a huge naval yard, and they produced a lot of naval ships on the Atlantic that fought in the war. Yeah, Dina Pelt says because of the location. Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to. It's kind of a very critical, strong point to reinforce, because it really defends the kind of the center to the north of the East Coast is where it sits. And yeah, so there's a lot of, they build up, and I know during the Cold War they built up a lot of missile defense systems here, and they just have reinforced the area. There's a lot of decent amount of military bases around here, because it just sits between Washington D.C. and New York City. Yeah, Timofey says population and industrial infrastructure. Yeah, so the population in New Jersey has always been high, and it's kind of seen as really growing outside of the large cities. New York and Philadelphia, as you see, there's large amounts of people live in New Jersey that go and commute to there. So really location's very critical, and that's what's led to a lot of the population growth. And its role in the Industrial Revolution, it's a huge I'll get into it. So it's a huge producer of chemicals, and it's a huge user of nuclear energy. But yeah, so good answer, guys, and definitely something a little different to think about with the history of New Jersey. I thought something kind of try to relate a little bit to Russia. But yeah, so I guess we'll get into our next topic here in 1 minute. And that will be geography and climate of New Jersey. So if we go to the next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, and I've shown you guys on maps, the New Jersey is located on the Atlantic, and it's part of the Mid-Atlantic states. So you have the Northeast, which goes down till Connecticut, which is right above New York, and then you have the Mid-Atlantic. So that's going to be New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland. And that is really notably different due to the difference in climate and geography. whereas the Northeast is very heavily wooded, and no, the Mid-Atlantic is not as much so. It is. It definitely is in a lot of parts, but it also has a lot more flatland and a lot more. The coast is a lot different. So, New Jersey's really separated into two parts. I would say some people say three parts. I don't believe them, but as someone from Jersey, I would say there's a North Jersey and a South Jersey, and there's pretty notable differences in the people and. I guess accent too. North Jersey has more of a New York style accent, and then I don't think I have a strong one at all. But there may be some things you hear off of it. And then South Jersey has more of a not really Southern, but more of like Pennsylvania, Philadelphia kind of accent. So that's a big difference. Pork roll and Taylor ham. What I mentioned earlier. Taylor ham is North Jersey, pork roll South Jersey. And just there's kind of differences, and the geography is pretty notably different. So in northern New Jersey, so especially northwest, it's mostly wooded and smaller mountains. And southern New Jersey is pretty much it's very flat with farms, and it's really big on farms and pine forests. And then the whole coast of New Jersey is large sandy beaches and wetland areas, and you can actually see that go up into New York. So right outside New York City on the southern side, by Jersey City and Elizabeth, you see it's a lot of wetlands actually, and they build up a lot of industry there. So the climate is divided as continental in the north. This is like actual official classifications. So it's divided as continental in the north and humid subtropical in the south. I guess kind of subtropical. I don't know. It's it's pretty temperate. We have 4 seasons. It's very known for its autumn, which is the fall. It's very, very known for that, especially in northern New Jersey. So the seasons are really visible, and it gets cold and it snows in New Jersey, North Jersey. Not as much, especially close to the coast. It doesn't really snow very much, and we're pretty subject to storms called nor'easters, which will come and hit us pretty hard. So, Victoria asks, what is the nicest beach in New Jersey? That is a good question. I know people say Long Beach Island is very nice. I've been a few times. Not a huge fan. It's very pretty, but I'm not a huge fan. I like more of I like where I grew, where I lived, and I spent my summers down in Manasquan, New Jersey. I thought that was beautiful. Manasquan and Point Pleasant were very nice. I like mostly Manasquan, but and if you go farther north, it kind of gets a little bit more relaxing, less party. But it's I think LBI, and then you kind of, if you want it like just very pristine and beautiful, you kind of want to stay out of the really, really popular touristy spots, which are where the boardwalks are, and I'll get into the shore a little bit after that. But yeah, so I like Manasquan personally. But anyway, let's go. If we go to the next slide, I just want to show you guys a quick temperature map, and you can kind of see how dramatically different it is from North Jersey to South Jersey with the lows and the highs. So in the north, it gets a lot colder in the summer. In the winter, my bad. It gets a lot colder, and then in the south, it really warms up, and you could actually like feel the difference. And where it's even in where I live kind of right on the border of getting into more of a hilly area, and it's a notable 5 degrees colder in the winter from where I live, on top of like as I get into the hills to where a town over, which is more a little lower elevation wise. And then the highs are they're not as extreme, but they coincide with the lows. And I know the shore gets pretty hot, and then you see in the south on average a lot hotter. So let's go to the next slide, and we can see this is a picture from the Delaware Water Gap, and this is kind of the autumn that I was talking about, or the fall, and it's it's really colorful. So that's all of the majority, not all obviously, but the trees are really they're deciduous trees, so they change. The leaves change and fall off, and you get a lot of colors. We have two. So Timofey says the temperatures are similar to Moscow, but in Moscow winter is colder. Okay, yeah, I see. I mean, that's the stereotype that Moscow's winter is pretty harsh. And we get a good amount of snow, but not too much. It's nothing like as you get into upstate New York, you actually get a lot of snow from the lakes. But yeah, and then so Marina has a question, but good insight, Timothy. But so Marina has a question, and how long does it take to drive from the south to the north of Jersey? I'll probably say if you're using the highways, if you're using the turnpike, probably two hours, 2.5 hours maybe, 2.5 close to 3. It really depends on traffic, and that's kind of a big part of New Jersey is traffic everywhere all the time. And I know some people say that New Jersey drivers are bad, but from our perspective, we're good because we're just used to driving fast and with traffic all the time. So yeah, good question though. But so yeah, I guess 2.5, 3. It really depends on the traffic and such. So I wish, and if you keep that in perspective, it's not that big. So it's a small state, but there's a lot of there's just a ton of people everywhere. So yeah, let's so this is the fall on the Delaware Water Gap. I just wanted to show you guys a picture of that. I thought it'd be cool. And then if we go down, we say to the next picture, we see falls in Passaic. These are falls from Passaic County. And this is kind of, I wanted to show this. This is really, I thought it was really cool and really pretty, and I've actually been here before. But it kind of shows, it's indicative, or it shows the development of kind of the industry that really followed along the falls line. So that's why it was such a big player in the Industrial Revolution in the United States, and why the population grew so quickly, especially in northern New Jersey, is as it sits near the falls. So there were a lot of mills and manufacturing plants, early manufacturing plants there. So yeah, and if we go to the next picture, we see this is I've actually hiked up this mountain in high school, actually, in my high school environmental science class. And this is, I wouldn't really call it a mountain, it's more of a glorified hill, but this is on the Delaware Water Gap. So you see that as you go farther west in New Jersey and you get by the water in the valleys, you get closer to the Appalachian Mountains, and you see a lot more of more hilly wooded landscape terrain as opposed to the other side of New Jersey, which is pretty flat. So anyway, that's for the geography and climate, and let's get into some state symbols. If we go to the next slide. So every state in the United States has some symbols, and the state animal or the state bird, and so every state in the United States has that. New Jersey is known as the Garden State, and yeah, so that's kind of like our nickname is the Garden State. This is the flag of New Jersey. Every state has their own flag. Sweetie Lizzie asks, are there a lot of traffic accidents in New Jersey? I would assume so. I don't really know the numbers on that, but I would assume so, just purely based off population and the amount of cars that are actually on the road. Yeah, I don't really know. I guess the best way to look at it would be like percentage per 1,000, but to really gauge whether or not there's a lot. By numbers, I would assume there's more than other states just because the physical amount of cars on the road. But good question. So this is the flag of New Jersey, and the motto is liberty and prosperity, and started in 1776. And if we go to the next slide, we can see some of the state symbols for New Jersey. So on the left, we have a picture of blueberries, which is the state fruit, and they're one of my favorite fruits. And they're grown in New Jersey. In the bottom left, we have horses. Obviously, it's a horse. And that's the state animal of New Jersey. And there's actually a lot of horse ranches and such. And horseback riding is really popular in the state, especially in the more rural areas. So there's a lot of really built up areas, and then there's a lot of areas with a lot of land. So yeah, and then on the top right, my mom actually took this picture, by the way. Of the top right is our state tree, which is the red bird. Oh my God, the red oak. Duh. The top right is the red oak, and you can see they have really beautiful leaves in fall. And then the bottom right is the eastern goldfinch, which is the state bird. So we have a question from Marina. Do a lot of people do mountaineering? Kind of. Yeah, people go for hikes and walks and such, but it's not as mountain. There's not as many mountains as you would expect in New Jersey. You kind of have to really drive and look for good trails and paths. So it is popular, but living out west now, it's not nearly as popular as it is out here because your access to fun nature trails and mountain hikes are not really it's really not there. So but yeah, no, I mean, people do hike, and I do remember going and driving to go hike with my friends in high school and such, and it is fun, but I wouldn't call it mountaineering, more of just hikes, I guess, nature walks and such. And yeah, so if we go to the next slide, I'd like to talk a little bit about the demographics of New Jersey. So the population of New Jersey is 8,882,190 people, which is pretty high. As I said, is the fourth? Oh no, it's the 11th most populated state in the country. Yeah, 11th most populated. So, and then the average per capita income is $37,288 per person, and then per household, I believe it's closer to 50. And that's actually the third highest in the United States. So that follows behind Washington, D.C., which is a very small urban area, and Connecticut, and then it would be New Jersey. So it's a relatively affluent state. The cost of living is really expensive in New Jersey, so that kind of makes up for the per capita income. So what you can buy in New Jersey is a lot more with that money is a lot less. I guess it's like homes and such. They're a fraction when you go down to southern states, say North Carolina and such. You could get the same home for a quarter of the price as it would be in New Jersey. And a lot of that's location, because New Jersey is a very convenient place to live, because you get access to the cities, you get access to the beach, you get access to some mountains. It's a really convenient place to live. That's kind of makes up for why it's so expensive. And also, a lot of people who make a lot of money from New York City choose to live in New Jersey, actually. They either really live in New Jersey, in the city, Long Island, which is in New York, and then Westchester County, which is north New York, north of the city. So Marina asks, who is more famous for horses, New Jersey or Kentucky? Definitely Kentucky. Definitely Kentucky. New Jersey, they have a few racetracks and such, but it's not nearly as there's a steeplechase here called the Hunt, which is that's kind of where I grew up. It's right around there, so it was pretty popular, but not even close. Sweet Lizzie asks, can I see these birds in all seasons? I'm really not sure. I am not a bird watcher. I really don't know, to be honest. I'm sorry. So if we go down, we could. I would like to continue to go through this slide. So the capital of New Jersey is Trenton, which is not the most populous city at all. Ethnically, it's a very diverse state with 68% white, 14% black, and 8% Asian, and then the rest, 10% is made of other ethnicities. So it's very ethnically diverse. It's pretty noticeable. It has the second largest Jewish population in the country, and then the second largest Muslim population in the country. So Dina Platt's second Jewish population, not California, is the second after New York. No, New Jersey is it's pretty known. It's known for there's a lot of Jewish people who live in New Jersey, and there's a lot of really nice synagogues and around in New Jersey and such. So yeah, it's really New Jersey outside in New York on the East Coast is really more popular. So you can see that it's religiously pretty diverse. And so the United States is a very Protestant country, but in New Jersey and there's a lot of Catholic people too. So religiously and ethnically, it's very diverse, and it's really cool. You see a lot of cultures and a lot of religions and stuff. So New Jersey also has the most scientists and engineers per square mile in the U.S. I found out about that when I was doing my research for this. And then, so its largest city is Newark with only 282,090 people. So that's kind of shows that it's so populous, but its largest city is only 282,000 people, shows that there's so many just of cities and towns of that size in the state. It's just there's people everywhere, and that's Victoria asks, what do you find unique about New Jerseyans? Oof. We're going to get into that actually a little bit later if you want to hang on to that thought. Marina asks, are there a lot of universities in New Jersey? Yeah, there's a ton of universities in New Jersey. So Princeton University is is kind of the premier school in New Jersey, and that is that's an Ivy League school and typically top rated in the top 1 to 3 best schools in the United States. Yeah, so good questions, guys. Yeah, and if we go to the next slide, we got some pictures. And so we have the top left. These are kind of 3 of the big cities in New Jersey. Top left is Trenton. Bottom left is Newark, which is the largest city in New Jersey. And then the top right is Jersey City. So Jersey City is actually just right across the river from New York City. And it's kind of, I mean, if you live in New York, you will not think that you could tell there's a difference between you want to emphasize the difference between New Jersey and New York, but it's kind of an extension. For an outsider, it's an extension of New York City and kind of grows out of it. So it's a lot of high rises, and a lot of the business districts are in Jersey City on the river and such. And then if you guys have ever seen the movie Sully, actually, this is the river in Jersey City where the airline captain landed a airplane in the river. He had a malfunctioning motor engine, and he landed it, a big commercial jet, and everybody was safe and fine. So yeah, that's kind of the 3 areas. So the top left, Trenton, that's the capital, and the gold little cap, that's the Capitol building in New Jersey. I've been to Trenton a few times. It's okay. It's I mean, you have like the seat of New Jersey, and it's very pretty actually. It's close to Princeton. It's a really pretty area of New Jersey, city really in New Jersey. So anyway, so if we go to the next slide, I would like to talk a little bit about the economy in Jersey. So New Jersey is the eighth highest GDP in the U.S. So that's like 650 some million. No, billion, I guess. It would be billion, yeah. So the GDP is 650 billion or so. So if New Jersey were a country on its own outside of the United States, it would be sandwiched right between Poland and Switzerland, so which is around the 50th highest GDP in the world. So Poland would be below it, and then Switzerland would be the next country above it. So to put that in perspective, there's a lot of people in New Jersey, and there's a ton of industry. So that's kind of, I wanted to throw it in perspective with how you view, if you could try to place it against something in the world. It's more comparable to Poland and Switzerland, and it's a lot smaller than Poland. But so the main industries in New Jersey are pharmaceuticals, so I guess medication and pills, and then biotechnology, shipping, and agriculture. So the Port of New York in New Jersey is the largest U.S. port on the Atlantic. It's huge, and that's what this is actually a picture of. It's Port Elizabeth. And I don't know the actual numbers for the traffic, but it's a massive, massive port. And it's huge with docks everywhere, and there's shipping containers all over the area. So, so what's kind of cool about New Jersey and interesting is that they use a ton of nuclear power plants. So even though they have a really high industry, it's relatively carbon clean, and obviously it's not good for there's still things that are bad for the environment, but it's relatively for the industry, for the amount of industry and factories there are, the emissions aren't as high as it is in some other states. And this is actually due to their 42% of their all electricity in New Jersey is from nuclear power plants. So this is a relatively clean energy source as opposed to burning coal and natural gas. So also tourism is a huge industry in New Jersey, and you see a lot of people coming down from New York City or Philadelphia or even interior of New Jersey. And I've seen people drive from Connecticut to go to the Jersey Shore. It's kind of one of the big things that New Jersey is really known for, and there's like a culture behind it and such. So yeah, and there's also a large gambling industry in New Jersey. With Atlantic City was originally the Las Vegas of the East, and then they just actually recently legalized sports gambling in New Jersey. So I know that people, FanDuel is the app for this. So I know a lot of people in New York City, if they want to go sports gamble, they'll go just hop on a bridge, drive to New Jersey, and as soon as they're over the state line, they'll definitely they'll go and they're able to gamble actually because they use the location on the people's phones. But yeah, Wade Vegas says Kentucky is more famous for horses. Oh, definitely. Yeah, no question about it. No question about it. But yeah. So if we go to the next picture, we can see this is actually Atlantic City. So we have a bunch of these resorts, and you can see there's a pier out into the water. I've been to Atlantic City a few times. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think it's a little hyped up, and it's not nearly as big or I guess showy and flashy as Las Vegas is in any regard whatsoever. But it's kind of it's a little past its heyday of being a big touristy kind of place. And yeah, I mean, people still go there, and the resorts are big and they're really cool and nice, but it's getting a little run down. So I'm not a huge fan of AC. That's what we call it. It's called AC. So anyway, if we get to the next discussion, I just want to quickly go through this because we're got about 15 minutes left, and I still want to talk a lot about like the culture and stuff. So did any of the stats about New Jersey surprise you guys? And is there anywhere in Russia that you can see similarities to New Jersey? If so, where and like why? So not necessarily like climate, because I assume that since it has the continental climate, it's a lot of it would be similar to Russia. I guess more of like the metro area and how densely populated it is. And I know that most of the Russia that's placed in Europe is really the most populated parts of Russia, but it's densely populated. So I guess that would be more of cities there. So the most surprising stats for New Jersey looking into this, and the one that surprised me the most was actually that the most amount of scientists and engineers live in New Jersey, which I thought that was really interesting. And I didn't know that. I guess it makes sense because it's really known for pharmaceuticals and such. So yeah, guys, I'm going to move on. But if you have any answers to these questions, please just throw them in the chat. I'd love to address them, and we can chat about it. Cool. So if we go to the next slide, we have some pictures of some famous New Jersey artists. So on the left, we have Bruce Springsteen, which is the boss. He's kind of known as, he is, I would say, probably the most famous New Jersey artist, and he sings a lot about it. And this is a picture from his album, Born in the USA. So he's big, and I actually have a funny story about Bruce Springsteen. And I'm not a huge fan. I don't really listen to his music at all, so I didn't really know. But I was flying to Europe, and I had a layover in in Amsterdam, in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. And I remember going through the passport security because we're not an EU country, so they go through passport security. And the guy, it was a younger Dutch man. He looks at my passport and looks up at me. And this is one of the few times that I've traveled to Europe, so I'm all nervous about going through the passport. And he goes and he asks me, he's like, "Do you know the boss?" I'm like, "What? No," getting all nervous about it and intimidated. He's like, "Come on, you must know the boss." And I'm like, "Who?" He's like, "You're from New Jersey, the boss." I'm like, "Oh, Bruce Springsteen." Yeah. So I thought that was pretty funny, and I got a little nervous and I was sweating just going through security because I was like, "Who is he talking about?" But yeah, so Bruce Springsteen's a big guy, and in the middle we have actually Frank Sinatra, and he's most famous for his songs about New York, but he grew up in Hoboken, which is in New Jersey. And then on the right we have Bon Jovi, John Bon Jovi, and he's a famous rock singer in the United States. If we go to the next slide, we have some famous actors. So on the left is John Travolta, I like him the best. This is John Travolta from Grease. Um, and yeah, I like him in Grease, but I like him the best in Pulp Fiction, to be honest. Then we have Tony Soprano, which is James Gandolfini in the middle. And he's kind of a really big, famous New Jersey actor. And then on the right, we have Tom Cruise, and he's from Jersey as well. So, yeah, and then if we go to the next slide, we have wanted to try to relate it if there's any people who like more contemporary U.S. music. These guys are the Jonas Brothers, and they're really popular with the younger crowd in the U.S. now. And yeah, they produce a lot of hits, and they're from New Jersey as well. So I remember they used to have a show on like the Disney Channel, which is one of the American networks for keeping up. I forget what it was called, but it had to do with the Jonas Brothers and all, and that took place in Jersey. So yeah, if we go to the next slide, I'd like to get into some quick sports and media. So Tim Fay asks, are local patriotic feelings strong there and in the whole U.S.? Yeah, definitely. So New Jersey kind of has its own little culture. That's obviously part of the bigger American culture, but people are very proud to be from New Jersey. People are very proud to be from New Jersey. And it's funny because you don't see it really as much. And I guess in New York City, you see it a little bit here, people proud to be from New York. But like New Jersey, I always say to my friends, like, you don't see as many tattoos of a state. Like the amount of people who have tattoos of their state is probably most prevalent in New Jersey. Whereas in New Jersey, you see people with New Jersey tattoos like all over the place. And it has to do with the culture, I think. And there's like a lot of state pride to be from Jersey. But which is pretty funny and interesting. But like I have friends in Connecticut. I'm like, dude, nobody has a tattoo of Connecticut. Like everybody's like, it's the tattoo of New Jersey. It's the look. But so it's kind of funny. So sports is New Jersey only has one professional sports team, the New Jersey Devils, but the New York Giants, New York Jets, and the New York Red Bulls. So Giants and Jets are football teams, and the Red Bulls are soccer. They all play in New Jersey. So a lot of fans, especially football fans, will be Giants fans and New Jersey. And I'm actually a huge fan. And then this is actually a picture of the New Jersey Devils. So they're the hockey team in New Jersey. And there's a lot of fans. A lot of people are Rangers fans as well, like New York Rangers and New York Islanders. Mostly, you kind of see along the lines of Devils and Rangers fans are New York Giants fans, really. Whereas Long Island Islanders, the hockey team, fans are Jets fans. So New Jersey's very popular for its television shows. And if we go to the next slide, we can see two of them. And there can be a little stereotypical, to be honest. So I'm left with the Real Housewives of New Jersey. I've never seen it, but I know I have friends who've seen it who swear by it. It's apparently there's just a lot of drama on it. And then we see the Sopranos on the right. So that's about it's Italian mob family from North Jersey. So I really like The Sopranos. I would really recommend it. And Sweet Lizzie, I see. What shows can you advise? If The Sopranos, I mean, it's super stereotypical of the gang scene and the mob scene in New Jersey and North Jersey and the deep Italian roots with the Italian-American immigrants in New Jersey. So definitely The Sopranos, I think, for quality television. For more fun stuff, The Real Housewives, probably. And Victoria asks, so football or hockey more popular in New Jersey? I would say football is. New Jersey's a pretty big hockey state, but we're actually kind of known for our high school football as very good in the Northeast, in that part of the country. Obviously not as good as like Texas or the big states, big football states, but New Jersey football is it's good, and we have a lot of professional players and college players come from New Jersey and are recruited out of New Jersey. So yeah, and then if we go to the next slide, we kind of have the iconic Jersey show, and I definitely recommend giving it a watch if you want to know about. It's called The Jersey Shore, and on the left we have a picture of the cast, and it's kind of super stereotypical of what people think New Jersey people are like and such. And it's we have Vinny, Pauly D, Jay Wow, Snooki, Oh my gosh, Sammy, and then Ronnie, and those are all the guys from Jersey. Yeah, they're very. It's pretty interesting. I definitely, if you want to see what it's the stereotypical culture is like, and so I've lived on the Jersey Shore and I worked at bars at I worked at a club kind of on the Jersey Shore, and it's so sadly stereotypical, but you can see it. I feel like the show came out and then people have tried to be like the show with like them going to clubs and everything. It could be a little embarrassing, to be honest, but yeah, that's kind of the stereotypical New Jersey thing. The Jersey Shore, like it's the Italian, the Guidos and everything. It's a whole, yeah, it's a whole thing that I can get into a talk for days about. But yeah, so definitely, if you want to see a show, I wouldn't really recommend it as a good show, but it is pretty entertaining. So, and I can't even understand half the things that they say. So it's pretty interesting. But if we go to the next slide, I like to talk about like what to do in New Jersey. So it makes it, the really cool thing about New Jersey is its location. So it's really convenient to travel to north and south to New York City. So really North New Jersey is connected by trains to New York City, and then southern New Jersey is connected by trains to Philadelphia. I think the train lines to New York are a little better. It's called NJ Transit. That's what we use. But the roads are really well developed. So it's kind of known as, there's a little bit of the stereotype when like you'll go and meet an outsider and be like, oh, I'm from New Jersey. People ask, oh, what exit are you from? Because not almost every town, but a lot of towns have, when you're driving down the highway, every single mile has an exit and a town name on it. So every mile marker on the highway will bring you to a different town, and it's just, you can see how densely populated it is, where there's very few miles that are just missed completely, especially in northern New Jersey. So travel is really easy in New Jersey. We have to pay tolls when we go on the roads. If you go on the Turnpike and the Garden State Parkway, which the Garden State Parkway brings you by the ocean, and you get to all the beach towns from there, and then the Turnpike will bring you right down the center of the state to Philadelphia. You have tolls for those roads, but it's really well developed and easy and fast to get to. Once you have access, once you get onto the highway, it's pretty easy to get everywhere. So yeah, so it's easy to get to New York City and Philadelphia, as I said. And then it's sandwiched. So the state is sandwiched between small mountains on the left, in the west, I guess. I don't know if it's left, but in the west with ski resorts, and then on the right, on the coast is really long, beautiful coastline. So shopping is really also popular in New Jersey. So there's no state sales tax on clothes in New Jersey. So that means that there's a lot of big malls outside of Philadelphia and outside of New York City that are actually in New Jersey, where they have a lot of designer things and a lot of designer stores. And that's why a lot of people from New York City will go and do their shopping in New Jersey, actually, because there's no state sales tax. And I actually go, in my last week in Americas, I go into like the different state rules and such. If you want to learn more on that, go check those out. But yeah, so what people really do in New Jersey is pretty dependent on where you live. So in North Jersey, you have more access to like more wilderness, and you have access to New York City. So that's really popular. I remember going to concerts in New York City or going to Broadway shows, and it's easy to do that. Southern New Jersey is more agricultural and rural, so a lot more things you'd see to do are probably more common to people who live in those areas, in rural areas. Football is a lot bigger in southern New Jersey than northern New Jersey in some cases, for like local high schools and such. People who live by the coast, obviously they go to the shore a lot, or they work at the shore. And then people who live out west in New Jersey and western New Jersey by Pennsylvania probably are into hiking and such. So yeah, if we go to the next slide, I'd like to quickly talk about the shore. So the shore, and I'm running out of time here, but I think we're going to go a few minutes over and try to get some questions and some stuff, some comments from you guys quickly. So I'll just quickly fly through this, and I'd love to answer any questions that you guys have. So New Jersey is most famous for the Jersey Shore, as from the Jersey Shore TV show, and I've kind of been going over this a lot. So it's the coastline is known for warmer water, large beaches, and good fishing. And it's home to many boardwalks. So boardwalks are like these giant wooden paths built along the beach with carnival rides, games, restaurants, tourist attractions, just your typical stuff. And that's really popular in New Jersey. People will go and stay by the boardwalks. There's a lot of things for kids to do, for adults to do, and such. So it's also, if you're a younger person, the Jersey Shore is a really well-developed nightlife. So a lot of people in the winters, people typically go out a lot and stuff. Oh, thank you very much, Timothy. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. But yeah, the nightlife is pretty popular at the Jersey Shore, and that's kind of what it's known for the younger people, and where fun places to go and such, and a lot of clubs and younger people everywhere. Probably not now because of COVID, but normally. So anyway, if we go to the next slide, we can see a little bit of a better image of a boardwalk, where this is kind of the carnival rides, and this is the Point Pleasant boardwalk. So this is I actually worked on this boardwalk at a bar here. So that's kind of shows you the big, that's kind of what a boardwalk is, and it's right next to the water, next to the ocean. So if we go to the next slide, we have kind of our last quick discussion. So it's more of New Jersey and culture. So did you guys recognize any of the famous New Jersey actors and musicians? And then have you seen any of the shows that I showed you guys? The Jersey Shore, The Sopranos, or The Real Housewives of New Jersey? And also that these shows are like really stereotypical of New Jersey, and they kind of do portray the people who live in the state in kind of a bad light. It's not very classy, a lot of the television. So if you guys have heard about New Jersey, have you heard about any other stereotypes? So as I was doing my research, I didn't realize that John Travolta was from New Jersey. I thought that was pretty cool, but I could see it. He's makes sense. And yeah, so yes, that's kind of New Jersey, and the stereotype is more of the Guido, especially after the Jersey Shore came out. There was the kind of the Guido stereotype. So yeah, and then lastly, if we go to the last slide, I just want to know if you guys have any questions for me. It looks like we have 3 minutes left. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys have. And I know I see there's 19 watching right now, so please, if you have any questions for me, I grew up there my whole life. I lived in different parts of New Jersey. I know I'm pretty familiar with the whole scene and the culture and the people and everything. And I've spent time in Philly and in New York City, so I've done I'm pretty well educated on the place, and I love the state, to be honest. I mean, it's my home state, and I'll always, even though right now I don't live there anymore, because I'm going to graduate school out here on the West Coast. I feel like it's always, and it's the culture and the attitudes of just kind of like, people from New Jersey are typically known to be more straightforward. And like New York City, like New Yorkers are loud. Same with New Jersey. People are very loud and straightforward with people. And another stereotype, I guess, which is I found to be very true, is we walk really quickly. So the pace of life is really fast, especially in New Jersey. So Marina asks, are you going back after you're done with school? I don't know. I don't know where I'll be. It depends on work, really, whatever the job is. But I'm not opposed. I love the place. So yeah, Marina also says, I know nothing about the stereotypes, but the famous people are pretty recognizable. Yeah, definitely. Sinatra and Bon Jovi are pretty famous around the globe. Yeah, I would imagine so. I would imagine they're Bon Jovi's like the big rocker, and then Sinatra's kind of redefined music. I like Frank a lot, which is Frank Sinatra. But anyway, well, guys, I'm gonna go wrap up here and say, first off, thank you very much for your time. It's been great talking to you. I really appreciate the questions. Definitely like, comment, and subscribe for the page, the American Center in Moscow. Comes out with tons of cool content every day. I know tomorrow at actually the same time, I'm going to be hosting a Last Week in America. So I got a cool list of topics that I'm going to talk about, and so please join me for that. That'd be cool. Yeah, there's a lot of things about controversy with schools opening, so I'm going to go over that. So join me for that. Like, comment, subscribe on the page. Yeah, guys, I hope you have a great rest of your week. I hope everybody stays healthy and happy and safe, and with everything, the craziness in the world. Anyway, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your week.